Ant, can you hear me, Ant?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I guess we'll give everybody a few minutes, one more minute. I'm going to record it too, so I'm excited. I got an hour, I think. We'll stop directly at an hour. So I probably think we're going to get through up 70 slides, a little bit of homework. Try to keep it interesting, fun. There we go. There's Daniel Mendoza. My college kid. There comes Roy. What's up, Roy? Daniel, can you hear us? Daniel Mendoza. There he is. You didn't get to meet all these people yet, Daniel, because you blew off our meet and greet. What's up, Andrew?
How you doing?
Excellent day. Another day in paradise.
Living the dream.
Yep. I think Brendan, I'll give him a minute. First week, right? Give him a minute or two. Did I set a reminder on that calendar invite, guys? Or no? Maybe I should, huh?
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Did you get alerted that there was the 3 o'clock? Like you get an alert?
Right out a day or two ago, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I'm wondering if there's an alert though, where because sometimes people get busy.
Well, if you accept the meeting, then you get into the Outlook, and depending on your setting, half an hour before the meeting pops up.
Oh, and I can set that.
I was reminded.
Yeah, you were. All right.
But everybody has different settings, so I don't know.
Yeah. I think we're missing a few. They'll get the recording this week. So the idea is that if it's going to happen, here come, oh, Andrew, yes. Having trouble with the audio? You can't hear me? Oh, you can't, we can't hear you.
Everybody's kind of clicking in and out for me.
Okay.
I'm going to try a different laptop.
Could you hear me okay? Or no? How about everybody else? Sergio, you can hear me, Roy? Anthony?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Maybe it's operator error, Andrew. Hey, by the way, he's my nephew. He works at Atlas. He's an engineer at Atlas now. Just so everybody knows. So when I go after him, you'll know why. I've known him since he was 8 pounds, 1 ounce.
Reverse nepotism.
That's right. You got an A. I'm going to give him his black belt. All right, so maybe we'll get started because I think I'm going to switch my slide over. Oh, here comes Sean. All right. It's much better live, Hey, Sean. What's going on?
Hey, Bill.
How are you?
Hey, guys. Good. How's everyone else?
Excellent.
Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Good.
I think I'm going to, we'll get rolling. Ta-da. Everybody see it okay? Everybody see it? Pretty okay?
Yep.
All right. Let's hide that. All right, so this is week 1. Again, the format is, I think once I get past around an hour, I think that we all run out of gas. So I'm going to try to time it out where we're going to do some presentation for a little while. Then I'm going to take you into the homework, explain that, and we'll try to end right at 60 minutes. And I think covered this during the meet and greet, but it recognizes the Six Sigma Green Belt certification, your ability to identify opportunities for improvement, objectivity, and quantitatively analyze cause and effects, implement valid solutions, and build tools. Like I fully recognize that very few companies, or there are some, but not many, that do this. We're going to be going over in the next, probably next 2 sessions. So I'm going to go through it quickly, but kind of set you up for, what does a Six Sigma project look like? We all do continuous improvement differently, but these concepts, what I'd like you to think about is, all right, how do I scale these back to what most people are doing anyway? Whether you're doing A3 or you work and you do periodic Kaizen events, or how do I take the same thinking? Because we're going to get into project management, who the team members should be on a Six Sigma project. Projects are usually 8-9 months long, and again, most of us we've kind of gotten away. It used to be a way that people did continuous improvement. It was the chosen way. So I'd like you to kind of think about it. How do I do this at ORNL? How do I do use these tools? Elbrick Steel, Atlas Stamping, light metals in the case of Daniel Mendoza, or wherever you end up after you graduate. So the International Association of Six Sigma certification defines a green belt professional who's well-versed in Lean Sigma methodology and possesses a thorough understanding of all aspects of the DMAIC. And again, we're going to go through the DMAIC, trudge through it, probably 2 or 3 weeks on define, definitely 3 weeks in measure, 3 weeks in analyze, probably 3 weeks in improve, and 2 weeks in control is kind of how it's probably going to fall out. And again, just an hour at a time, load leveled, so we're not falling asleep. So today, we're starting the define phase. I think we're going to get to the cost of poor quality. I think we're going to get through everything up to the cost of poor quality. So we're going to cover the DMAIC approach. What is Six Sigma? Part of the certification process, I guess I have to take you through the history a little bit, and roles and responsibilities, team selection. And then we're going to get into some fundamentals, the voice of the customer, the concept, critical quality, affinity diagrams, and Pareto. And then we're probably going to be able to, we may or may not get the cost of poor quality. It's kind of an interesting few slides. It gets into like the hidden costs of poor quality. It's kind of mind-blowing when you see it. And then I think next week is going to be, we're going to pick up with the metrics, the business case and project charter, cost benefit analysis, risk management, some FMEA. For those of you guys who haven't done it, we'll walk through that. And then we're going to do the easy part. So next week, I think the slides, we're doing more slides next week, but I think we're going to be able to breeze a little faster. So I think we're looking at probably two weeks to get the go through the vine. So there's the DMAIC. People that do A3 all the time, we know these like the back of our hands, right? This is the logical, it's a logical, structured, disciplined methodology for problem solving. In Lean, we call this Nemawashi. We want to proceed slowly, consider many options, gain agreement, and then implement rapidly, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And we want to spend most of our time with define and measure. Whether the project's 8 or 9 months long, like a Six Sigma project, a black belt project, or it's an A3, a flash A3, which is, an hour and a half. So the Six Sigma project phases, the define is, and again, I'm putting in the context of a black belt project, a project that a green belt might be assisting a black belt on, is define is the customer, what's critical to quality, and what are the core business processes involved. We want to select the appropriate responses to the formula, the all-important formula, which is why. As simple as this. This is Six Sigma. We can stop here in one slide. Y is a function of X's. What are all the variables X when you tie them together, they give us the effect we want, the impact we want. Y is a function of all the X's. And today we're going to get into a little bit about, all right, what's the voice of the customer and what are the critical few X's? Because generally, when we're trying to control a process, it's not a dozen X's. It's probably a handful. They call it the vital few, right? It's probably going to be 3 to 5 X's that are going to change the course of my process or my outcome or whatever I want from the process. The data needs to be gathered to measure it. So there's a lot of data that we have to gather and measure the performance of the core business processes involved. We want to be able to measure all the X's and we want to be able to quantify the Y's, as you'll see. And then the third step, analyze the data collected to identify root causes of the defects or significant improvement of deviations, whether in or out of specifications or opportunities for improvement. And then, of course, after we have all that, we're going to make some decisions on what we want to improve. And then, obviously the control process is, all right, after we're all said and done, how do we know we're going to be able to keep the car in this lane? What are the steps we're going to take? And as far as a Six Sigma project goes, these are very defined steps. There's actually you'll see as we get into next week, there's a closeout for each section, each box, each define, measure, analyze. It could take 4 weeks, 5 weeks to do the define. It could take 3 weeks to do the measure. So those are the kind of time blocks we're talking about when we're talking about doing, a big company doing 12, 15, 20 Six Sigma black belt like projects a year. So it's largely the A3 process, except, we're taking an A3, we're just taking the same thinking and chopping it into smaller pieces, right? It's the same result. Load leveling. So there's a define piece about selecting high payback projects and identifying the underlying metrics that will measure project success. And that's all done on a Six Sigma level. And it could take a while because as you'll see, it's going to involve customer surveys. It's a very deliberate, disciplined look at defining what we're going to try to go after. Define phase goals, establish a solid foundation and business case for the whole project. All right. It's probably the most important aspect of any Six Sigma project. I would argue that the improve and the measure and analyze are probably as important. Probably the measure to me is the most important. As you guys all, when we talk about A3, I always talk about the current condition. But define is also important because this talks about the scope. It's talking, making sure everybody agrees on what we're going after. All successful projects start with a current state challenge or a problem that can be articulated in a quantifiable manner, right? And I know that as we develop our A3 process, we try to quantify more and more. In the beginning, Olbrich Steel, the guys from Olbrich can definitely attest to, there wasn't a lot of difference between the define phase and the measure phase, the background and the current condition when we first started this and we started doing it. And here we want to articulate Six Sigma is all about quantifying, right? If I can't measure it, then I can't express it. It's not just enough to know the problem, you have to quantify it. So that's the key thing as you get more and more comfortable with Six Sigma tools, is just think, all right, sounds good, how do I measure it? You got a chat? Question? You can just pop in when you need, if you have questions. You can stop me anytime you want. I'm sorry, Sergio.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't know how you want to proceed.
No, anytime.
Just a very quick question, maybe to better understand. On a Six Sigma, the defining the business case, does it come in the same way as an A3 comes, like from a suggestion or a problem from any person in any department, or is it a larger scale problem defined by upper management, for example?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. If you're doing like a formal, like let's say you have a business where you have 8 or 10 full-time black belts that all they do is they go around and they run these big projects. The source of those projects are going to be from the senior leaders. from their plan, the annual report, or it's a problem. It's like a wound, a bleed that you have in your business somewhere. And so it's not identified like A3, where it could be anybody on the floor. It can be anyone. These are much more strategic policy deployment type things. And, and there's a limited number. Obviously, there's limited resources. As you'll see, the scope of these types of projects are they're expensive. People, full-time black belts doing them. And as we get into the history, and there's still some companies that do use just these projects. That's the only continuous improvement that happens in the business is by these groups. Did I answer your question okay?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, these things are assigned, by upper management to a black belt team, to a black belt, and a black belt uses green belts and and others.
Okay, like a scrap reduction at Ulbrich would be certainly Six Sigma led by black belts.
Exactly. Or,
Okay.
and I think you can make a case that, scrap at Ulbrich, you can do it that way. Or I think you can start to, break it down into certain area, like we can use the A3 process the same exact way. And we may use some, you may use some of the Six Sigma tools that we're going to go through over the next few weeks, to do that, to help you, with that. Am I good? Yeah, guys, that's Sergio, everybody else, just anytime, just stop me, okay? That's why it's like the hour is an hour. This is low level, I'm happy to, I like it, because I want to make sure I'm explaining. And so we're going to define our deliverables. And these are the tools. Here's Brendan. I'll give Brendan a second to jump on. You there? Yeah, all right, so defining deliverables. Here's some of the tools and deliverables of the define phase. So again, think about like an 8-week project, and think about a company like Motorola, where they have maybe 12 or 15 of these projects going on over the course of a year. All right. And the deliverables, what we want out of it. So think about like there's closings every 2 months or maybe every 3 months. And the things that come out of the define phase are the business case. So obviously when you think business case, you're thinking project, product managers, marketing people. This is a larger project. We want the problem statement, the project objective, the project scope, the timeline, and the team. And I mean, there's going to be monies that are going to be allocated to do this. Look at stakeholder assessment, a high-level Pareto chart analysis, a high-level process map, voice of the customer, voice of the business, what's critical to quality. And we're going to touch on all of those pieces of these deliverables. And then the financial assessment. Brendan, I know you just jumped on. If anything you want to stop or question or just go ahead. All right, just turn your mic on.
Okay. Sounds good. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. I'm going to send you everybody's going to get the video anyway, so.
Perfect.
So what is Six Sigma? I mean, it's a whole bunch of different things, right? The statistical term refers to measure of variance. That's what we're measuring, right? When we talk about that Y is a function of X's, a whole bunch of X's, a critical few X's, we're talking about variation and being able to control the variation. So if we go back to that formula, Y is a function of X, Six Sigma means we're going to control the X's, right? And again, we're not talking about 1,000, we're not talking about a dozen. Generally, what we're going to try to identify is the vital few, critical to quality X's. If we control those, we're going to get the result we want. So it's also evolved into a discipline to include many aspects of business performance. So it's not only is a statistical term, but it's also, like I just mentioned, it's a measure of variability and variance. It's a process measurement methodology. And you're going to see a lot. We're going to do a lot of it. We're going to do some gauge R&R. You're going to see tools, process measurement type tools that we're going to be able to use in different parts of the business. It's a business strategy for some. And again, I think it's diminished a lot because I don't think people have the resources. One of my friends works at Rolls-Royce, and they eliminated their entire Six Sigma, all the black belts, gone, over during the course of the pandemic, and you see less and less because you just don't, people, a lot of times people think that, when times get tough, the first people we got to get rid of are the continuous improvement people. And then sometimes the real silly ones are the salespeople. So, like what we're seeing is we're seeing much more, in terms of continuous improvement, less of this formal, high overhead, big projects, and doing more like the old brick way, right? Six Sigma is a philosophy, and again, it's about, I got to be able to quantify everything. I'm going to quantify all the X's. I'm going to quantify my voice of the customer. It's about putting numbers to everything. It's about a project management type, again, think about how you do continuous improvement and how could I apply that, the project management thinking, to a much smaller scale, like a much shorter duration type of improvement. And also at its basic level, it's a set of tools. So we have our, so what's Six Sigma? It's a measure of variance, right? That's the first thing, variability and controlling variation. So a sigma refers to standard deviation, which is a measure of variation. And we're gonna get into this more next week as we get into into the statistics of it. But variation is the enemy of any quality process. We need to understand, manage, and minimize process variation. And it's an aspiration. Six Sigma is an aspiration or a goal of process performance. And the Six Sigma goal is to minimize variation. I just said that. So you have the upper and lower specification limits. A standard deviation is a number used to tell how measurements for a group are spread out from the average. I get the same thing all the time. How consistent are they? And again, we're going to play with this a lot more, in the next few weeks, actually. And a low standard deviation means that most of the numbers are close to the average. A high standard deviation means that the numbers are more spread out, right? And we'll get into the bell-shaped curve and normal curve and all that. So Six Sigma performance, this table, I think you're going to see it repeatedly. I'll flash it up here once in a while, just so we all keep in mind, what we're talking about. So Six Sigma is a yield out of a process of 99.9997%. Defects per million opportunities is 3.4. So out of a million chances, I'm only going to have 3.4 defects. So that means it's a pretty high standard. The defect rate is 0.00034%, and the cost of poor quality is less than 10%. Well, we're going to cover cost of poor quality today. We're going to touch on it, with all the hidden costs of poor quality, plus the ones that are obviously very apparent when you have to, give people refunds and credits and all that kind of thing. But, and then, you look at even going down to 3 Sigma, which sounds great. We're at 93% yield, 66,000 defects per million opportunities, etc. So we're talking about a pretty high bar here in terms of process control and lack of variation. So let's go back to
Professor.
Daniel, you got a question?
Yeah. Can you let us know when something's really important and we should write it down? Maybe it would help us with our.
Yeah. So you're thinking in terms of the test?
Yeah, or in terms of something that's very practical.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely
like whenever something's really important, and then I could write it down.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Don't worry about the test, whatever you do, because we're going to go through a pretty good review. You try to sit back and enjoy it. It's like a amusement park ride, the Six Sigma. I'm kidding. So
So Bill, the Six Sigma is not 6 ways to reduce your variance. It's actually a quantitative
it's a measure.
result. So our goal is to get to 6 Sigma, so we have a yield result 99.9997 as opposed to 6 different ways we can reduce waste.
Exactly. It's a measurement of our standard deviation, or we're going to get into the difference between standard deviation and variance next week, I believe. But yes, it's an actual measure. And think about it, guys. I mean, most of us, we don't really spend a ton of time really paying this close attention to our processes. Maybe at Albrecht, the 7 mil, with what you're getting out of that in terms of data, so it's a whole nother level of looking at our processes. And these are not just operation, manufacturing processes. There's, as we get into voice of the customer and, customer satisfaction, and it's pretty much universal. You can use it anywhere, right? In terms of if I really want to dig deeper and try to understand the process, first I got to measure it. And 2, once I measure it, how do I make it talk? Because then, obviously data doesn't talk; it just sits there. And to answer Brendan's question, that's the point of measuring how much variation am I getting from my mean, from the average, So 3 Sigma. Let's say I didn't get the 6; I only got the 3. You got a question? Overall, you got to drop off at 3:30. Okay, I'll send you a recording. 3 Sigma project have a defect rate of about 7%. So let's say, hey, you know what? Go back to that table. God, that sounds pretty good. 3 Sigma. I can't get the 6, but basically, no modern computer would be able to function. There'd be about almost 11 million healthcare claims that are mishandled every year. About 19,000 U.S. savings bond would be lost every month. 54,000 checks would be lost. 4,000 invoices would be sent out incorrectly each month. 540,000 erroneous call details would be recorded each day from a telecommunications company. The one that I always get, the 3 Sigma, think about the number of bags that would have to be lost and that would have to be redirected and brought, and forwarded to your destination. So 3 Sigma sounds good. A lot of opportunity for a lot of cost of poor quality there. And then at a 1% defect rate, we'd have 20,000 lost articles of mail every hour. Unsafe drinking water, almost 15 minutes a day. You get the point. So even at a 1% defect rate, some processes would be unacceptable to anyone. The 6 Sigma philosophy is that of continual improvement through the use of data and specific variation reduction techniques. So again, it's all about data and reducing variability. A competitive advantage is gained by meeting customer expectations that perform within spec limits in the most efficient, effective way. That's the 6 Sigma philosophy. I think, I started doing at Duraflex 6 Sigma when I started my journey, my continuous improvement. I thought this was what I wanted to do, because it was back in the early 2000s. It was kind of in fashion as we get into the history a little bit. And I quickly realized that most of the tools, I can run my business. We can make a lot of improvements, without having to go into this kind of depth. So the tools we're going to look at, they use specific tools. Some of these tools we're going to talk about today. Some of them we're going to see throughout the presentation. Things like FMEA, different types of matrices, fishbone, histograms, SPC charts. They're used to scope and select projects, modify or design new processes, improve current processes, decrease downtime, improve customer response. And you're going to see these tools are used in each of the phases: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. The business strategy is the integration of its philosophy into action in order to achieve corporate objectives. And again, I think Sergio asked me about, where these projects come from, and largely it comes from the board of directors, senior leaders, at annual meetings, and next year, 2021, their projects would come out and there'd be 12 or 15 objectives. And that's where you put your black belts to work. It links the output of processes conducted within an organization to the expectations of the customer. The strategy is realized as waste and variation expenses are reduced and customer satisfaction increases, thus improving operating margins. I think the difference between you guys, all of you, who I've known for a while, I think what we're talking about here is from a TPS, the Toyota Production System methodology, it's people-centric. You focus on building leaders, developing people, developing people's ability to make improvements and kind of do what we're doing here. And then Lean, American Lean, is about the tools. And these are all different ways that people interpret all these different methodologies. Now, Six Sigma is definitely not about people. It's about understanding processes. The process is first and foremost, and getting a deeper understanding of the process. Which brings me to the whole course. Y is a function of X, right? And the X's are the critical few factors that are going to impact my Y, which is what I want, my goal. The Six Sigma approach is designed around the cause and effect model. If you want to change the effect, you just focus on the causes. If done properly, the effect as a dependent product will reflect the correct control of the independent causes. So the first step is to approach the general definition of cause and effect. So effects are, they identify the customer requirements for the process outputs. We're going to get into a few of those. Use the example of like a Chick-fil-A or my wife's frozen yogurt shop. What are the effects we want to see? Like, can we identify, the voice of the customer? What does our customer want from us, from our processes? And can we quantify it? Causes are identifying the processes that are involved in delivering those specific requirements. And the causes are identifying the respective inputs that go into the process that impact the required characteristics. Daniel, you don't have to write any of this down. Now, the second step in this approach consists of establishing the specific and measurable characteristics of the customer requirements. We're going to get into that today a little bit. The CTQs, critical to quality. Then we're going to prioritize them. And actually, our homework today, we're going to do a Pareto chart. I don't know, maybe it might be simple for, for some of you guys that have done it before. The homework's going to be to do a Pareto chart. And that's the point of it all is, how do I prioritize? What do I go after? And that's all part of this define phase. And so all these tools that we're going to see in the define phase is just for that. It's like, all right, well, I hear you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. What are the things that impact how you consider good quality or how you consider value, and how can we prioritize them? Then we want to identify which processes impact the characteristic or value the customer wants. All right. And again, I'll give you a specific example of that in a minute when we talk about customer service. And then we want to prioritize and streamline process efficiency and identify the critical inputs by identifying those that have significant influence on the customer's product and prioritize them for any needed improvements. Identify those that have little or no significance and pretty much ignore them. Now the output Y, the customer product characterized by its ability to meet requirements. The outputs are dependent, where they're changed directly or indirectly by either a process or an input, also known as Y. So Y is a function of X. Y is the measure of the process performance that you're trying to improve. It's the result or effect of various causes. A measure or output of a process. And again, when we talk about processes, don't just think operations. Roy, I think, might have jumped off. I think he has to pick up his daughter on Wednesdays at 3:30, but think about how that works in construction and his it's not just about production. That's the thing I think that we want to take out of this today. If anything that I can measure Y is usually the primary metric. And the input, so the other side of it, the general materials and efforts that go through a series of steps in order to positively influence the output, right? And these are independent variables. They need to be changed. We could change them directly. We can adjust them. We could turn the dial, known as the X or the cause. Either supplier provided or an output from another process. X's affect the Y's. And again, the idea of there's critical X's. And again, usually when we're looking at any kind of process, we're talking about a critical few. So the function part, the function of F is a function of X. The processes act as functions that transform X's into Y's that meet the customer's requirements. Functions include business systems, processes, sub-processes, steps, etc. Processes are designed using the transfer function syntax. They're active and procedural. They're primary factor in efficient productivity and need to be evaluated for improvement in efficiency, quality, yield, and necessity. The objective of Six Sigma is to identify those critical input X's. And again, I'm going to say it again. It's not 10 or 12. It's probably 3 to 5. And we want to control those until I can improve my Y. So this is an example. So pizza delivery company, they want, and a customer, they want to meet customer expectations of on-time delivery, right? There's been too many complaints that it's taken too long for people to get their pizza. They're waiting an hour and a half, 2 hours. By the time they get it, it's cold, not very tasty. You know, so the measure is going to be on-time pizza deliveries. And that's my Y, percent of on-time deliveries. Now, all my X's could be, might be traffic, might be the number of deliveries per driver dispatch. In other words, I'm just sending out too many my drivers out with too many pizzas and they can't hit the number. It might be the accuracy of directions, you know, whether they're using their GPS system. Could they be stopping and seeing their girlfriend on the way to someone's house? It could be the reliability of the drivers. There's a whole bunch of X's. So the key thing is, what are the few that are going to impact our customers getting their pizza nice and hot? And with this approach, all the X's are evaluated, and we're going to do a couple of extras, a couple of tools today that how do we evaluate all those X's to come up with those narrow few, the few on-time delivery pizza. They're not going to be all of them. And this approach to problem solving will take you through the process of determining all potential X's. And they become the ones used in the vital few are the ones that we use in that equation. It's a very powerful concept, requires the ability to measure your output and quantify your inputs. As we go through our A3 even, as you continue to develop your ability to go through the DMAIC, I think we insist more and more on, all right, how many, how often, how long, and begin to quantify. All right, so I gotta take you through this. Don't write any of this down, Daniel. The history of continuous improvement. I'm gonna try to breeze through it. But here it goes. So principles of lean manufacturing began to take shape. The reason they say, like you'd see back 1900, my Toyota, Taichi Ono, the company he worked for, Toyota, that their history starts with looms. The looms that you weave cloth. And one of the things that bothered grandfather Toyota was the fact that the cloth would get caught in the loom. Toyota Loom Works by 1920 or 30, they were recognized as one of the top suppliers of looms in the world. And the reason why was because if people are working with the loom, if the cloth got caught, the fabric got caught, it would take 2-3 hours of just taking it apart. And it was just a very laborious process. And the concepts of respect for people or Jidoka, comes from the fact that Toyota developed the first self-stopping loom. They gave the loom human quality. As soon as it started to get caught, it would stop automatically. And that's what made them world famous. So when they talk about the fact that, you know, the beginning of lean is then, they're getting into that's where the Toyota production system started, with the respect for people part of it and the continuous improvement part. And then of course Ford and Toyota, Ford with the continuous line, the assembly line, which was, you know, for those of you guys who have studied Ford at all, you know, it was very much inhumane in a lot of ways, you know, where, you know, people were not allowed to leave the line. They usually worked on the same part of the line every day. If they needed to go to the bathroom, for example, they would have to raise their hand somehow and get someone to come over. And there was a certain amount of time they had to go run to the bathroom and back. And I think, you know, Toyota, they studied, they were fascinated by the idea of the assembly line, you know, a single piece flow of a car just going down and being built as it went, but they weren't too impressed with the human aspect of it. I think it was a $3 day, I think, was the big thing back in the 20s, where the only way they can keep employees at Ford and work on that line was to offer them like $1 more than anyone else was paying, which I believe was somewhere around $2. And then, you know, as we get into the mid 80s, this is when we started to hear the buzz about Six Sigma. I think there was, you know, Motorola and Bill Smith. I think you know, that's where it started. He developed the Six Sigma at Motorola, and it was supported by the CEO. But it really caught fire in when General Electric picked it up, and they started deploying black belts at these projects. And the thing I think that really got everybody excited was there was a 60 Minutes interview with Jack Welch when he was at, obviously when he was at GE. And that's kind of when everybody said, oh, we got to do Six Sigma. I got to go certify myself. And I think that's what I got caught up in too, because I think, you know, at 9/11 happened, and, you know, my business kind of went off the rails for a tiny little bit. And I realized we had to change it up a little bit in terms of, we would make some improvements. And I kind of went in that direction too. And then, you know, by the time, once GE did it, you could see there's a whole list there of large companies, you know, that deployed this methodology. So Bill Smith at Motorola, he forged the path for Six Sigma through Motorola, and the CEO approved it. And then they did it exclusively as process management discipline throughout the whole company. And they were publishing like, you know, we saved $50 million. In this other companies, we saved $60 million. So there was all this press, and it wasn't on the internet, obviously, because there wasn't any, but, you know, people started to get impressed with all these numbers, you know, that people were claiming that they were getting out of their Six Sigma effort. So more and more people started doing it. Anyway, that's pretty much the history. You have the slides. Okay, let's talk a little bit about am I okay so far, guys? Everybody all right? Anybody crash?
I have a quick question though, Bill. I mean, when I look at the process and the history, this is, you know, it's been easy 70, 80 years. I mean, even more, depending on when we start counting. So by the time everybody implements this, when will that happen, and how Six Sigma will change by then, if we, you know, in another 50 years?
I think that's a really good question. Like the other thing, I think the best way to answer that is you look at how management, leadership, coaching has evolved. This is really about management by objectives, right? This is really about the numbers are the only thing that matters. And I think a couple of things have happened. One, we've gotten away from that kind of thinking. Any company now, you know, you can't keep people. It's a numbers driven kind of a strategy. And two, I think that you'll see as we go into this next section that it's kind of top heavy, you know, in terms of the number of people that need to be kind of just sitting around waiting to jump on a project. You know, so if your question is, you know, is it going to continue to grow? Like, I don't think that in 2020, you know, in terms of the challenges, you know, people challenges in getting people, like think about before the pandemic, people like Daniel Mendoza were really difficult to get a hold. And Daniel's is one of our people here, but you know, he's going to graduate with an engineering degree, you know, top of his class, the whole 9 yards. You know, so I think that what we're seeing is less of an emphasis on this type of strategy. Did I answer your question there, Sergio? Is that what you're asking me? Is like, is it going to grow or is it going to die?
Pretty much you replied. I mean, I was just wondering, since it's developing in such a very long period of time, I wonder by the time this will be embraced by many, many more companies, how it will change by then, or if it will be still applicable by then in another 50 years. But don't worry too much.
Yeah, I think the peak of what we're talking about was probably, you know, 2010, 2009. Because again, if I go down this list right now, Amex, Bank of America, Buffett, if you go down there and you kind of look at, you know, closely, do they still have like a stable of black belts? Are they hiring, you know, X number of black belts a year and running this? I think you see that it's on the downward slope of the curve. You know, but I still feel like the methodology itself and the thinking behind it is kind of getting more interwoven into the way people are doing continuous improvement now.
To piggyback on that, how's technology changing the role of Six Sigma?
Well, I think, you know, again, if I had, you know, the agile type people, you know, agile, in terms of software development, that's a good question. Can I think about that one?
Bill, if I could just add to that, I think one of the things to use an Ulbrich example is a lot of the big data that we're trying to collect now, that we're starting to collect, especially places like the mills, and now we're going into the annealing furnaces and things like that, are going to make the data that's needed to do these kinds of large-scale products available. Because you're collecting data now that you don't even know why you might need it, but we are collecting it. And then
If you
later
just
on,
saved
you're
me.
going to find out, boy, I'm glad we've been collecting that for 3 years, because now I'd like to see what the trend is on that, and we have it.
You know, you just saved me.
Yeah, all that.
You know, Brendan, there's the answer. Because, you know, you think about, you know, the FOIA stuff and really what it is, it's about just people, more readily accessible data.
Yeah. That SAS data is going to be invaluable
Yeah.
for things like this, we're going to find, I think.
Now
So
what do you
I guess what I'm hearing is you might not need to be a green belt or a black belt to go in and extract that data, but you need a green belt or a black belt to make sense of the data and determine whether there's a process improvement opportunity from that data.
to make it talk, right?
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah, right.
interpreting that data is what's going to help us, I think, Brendan. I think, because it's all going to be there, but to find out, to be able to use these tools that Bill's going to show us, to figure out what data, actually, what are those X's, go in there and find those things. What's significant in all this, I think, is going to be how this will help us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that amazes me is just how much data is collected on a daily basis that really always stays in the box, like it's not used, you know, whether it's SVC data, control charts, any kind of, you know, data that with good intention. So I think you answered my question terrifically, much better than I could, Stephen, in terms of how technology is going to impact, you know, our ability to use tools like these. How do we make the data talk and scream at us? So the responsibilities, again, each of the 4 Six Sigma belts represent a different level of expertise. Master black belt, somewhere around, you know, 60 hours of training, usually a project or 2, depending on the certification. Master Black Belt has a number of projects under their belt. That's how they designate that. Green Belt is what we're talking about now here. And then Yellow Belt's kind of entry level. You know, I think a thing that I see too is the Yellow Belt requirements. If you're doing any kind of continuous improvement on a daily basis, it's kind of you're Yellow Belt or higher. You know, once we get into Green Belt, now we're going to be talking about a lot of statistical tools that you'll see over the next few weeks. But that's kind of how they're broken down. Master Black Belts, we're going to get into them specifically. I'm going to breeze through them, but and there's also other roles. So just think about these efforts. You know, where in terms of Six Sigma projects, you know, there's a bunch of people involved. There's some infrastructure involved. Again, you may come up, especially Daniel, you may find yourself in you know, in a company that, you know, where they're going to require you to go on to your black belt. But there's also champions, sponsors, stakeholders, and then SMEs. So the Six Sigma organization, just think of a department of Stephen Freeze's. You know, it's organization-wide, the discipline's organization-wide, and you need leadership support. No different than if I want to try to build a strategy of using A3. I have to have support at least. Leadership by example, like encouraging. This is going to sound familiar to you guys. Encourage and reward. You know, thank, gratitude, align incentive systems. You know, put it in people's reviews. How many projects are you on? This is kind of how the thinking is, you know, as they're trying to build Six Sigma organizations. Now, you guys, as we go through this, just try to picture like 70 knuckleheads who made floor coatings in East Hartford trying to do this, right? That was me. That was like, come on. Eliminate functional barriers, all the same problems, right? Like eliminate silos, you know, like not eliminate them, but be able to work more smoothly with different silos and enhance systems thinking, you know, versus silo thinking, and balance standardization with flexibility. Or as Brendan's father says, that prime, you know, that prime part of the business life. How do we stay there? You know, where we're not too bureaucratic. There's not too many rules and regulations. People still feel free to think, be creative, to contribute. So that's the Six Sigma, how we think of what they think a Six Sigma organization should look like. Very similar to what we do. So executive leadership, they own the vision. They provide sponsorship, which to me is code for budget, and they set expectations for the results. So this goes to Sergio's question a little while ago. They enable the organization to apply Six Sigma, then monitor the progress. They set goals and objectives. They set performance expectations for the corporation. They ensure continuous improvement is in the process. You know, create a culture of continuous improvement. And I think I don't know how much. Maybe I should cover that at some point. But the concept of a company being in the prime part, like you take Ulbrich Steel, you know, 100 years old almost, and yet more nimble than a lot of startups are. If you think about it, ability to zig and zag and shift and change direction. You know, startups, I've been involved in. Duraflex is pretty much a startup. You know, it's fun. You know, there's not a lot of silos. An order comes in, it's our order. It's not, you know, it doesn't go over the fences. There's a lot of celebration. There's a lot of, you know, you behave like a family, and, you know, and you look at you guys at Ulbrich, and it's really a family with 600 people, I think, 600 employees, right? So the whole idea here is that's the role of executive leadership. That's where it comes from. That's where it starts with, you know, whether it's 4 generations or you know, 1. And eliminate barriers. That's all of job, whether you're doing Six Sigma or A3. Eliminate barriers, constraints. Champions and sponsors are the directors, executives, managers that they kind of help, you know, once they get the directive from senior leadership and ownership, funding, chartering, driving the Six Sigma projects that the Black Belt and Green Belt are doing. Champions and sponsors need to have a basic understanding of the concepts tools. They don't need to be green belts. You know, they should be yellow belts, probably at least that level. And again, we'll get to yellow belt in a second. You know, what kind of expertise they have. But the champions and sponsors play critical roles in deployment and critical for success of it. They maintain a strategic oversight, establish strategic direction for a portfolio of projects, define success. All these people are the ones that sit in on those, like as soon as we're done with define, let's say define takes us 2 months, or we'll have a closeout meeting. These are the people that would be attending the closeout meeting. Provide resolution for issues, resource, politics, kind of smoothing things out for people. And the Master Black Belt, again, is the most experienced, educated, and capable Six Sigma expert. I'm not a Master Black Belt because I haven't done 8 or 10 projects. I did, I believe, 2 or 3. Typical Master Black Belt has dozens of Black Belt level projects. They can lead multiple Six Sigma Black Belt projects while mentoring and certifying. The Master Black Belt works with high-level operations, directors, senior executives, and this is a full-time job, as we get into the Black Belt. That's what they do for a living. If you go onto LinkedIn and you type in Master Black Belt or Black Belt opportunities, you'll get an arm's length of opportunities. You know, there's still a lot of companies that do it. I just feel like it's less and less. And again, I think the other thing is, if you look at, go on LinkedIn and type in Chief Executive Officer or any high level, more and more you'll see Black Belt or Master Black Belt Six Sigma preferred. All right, so I think that people are taking this certification, this kind of thinking, and even though they're not really, don't have necessarily, a full-blown Six Sigma department, they still see value in this kind of thinking, and and interpreting it in your own way. But again, you'll see that the typical responsibilities are identify and define the projects, establish scope and goals. They're pretty much the architect getting the thing out of the ground. Train and mentor green belts. You're constantly developing green belts. Green belts are as you'll see, it's a part-time position in most of the companies. And black belts, you're either recruiting them or you're turning green belts into black belts. And the Master Black Belt and the Black Belt, for that matter, should have the capability of developing, training and developing others. They facilitate toll gates and checkpoints. They report out and update stakeholders and executives. That closeout meeting we talked about. They establish the strategy and the roadmap and lead the implementation. The Black Belt is the most active and valuable professional of all the belts. They have led multiple projects. They've trained and mentored various candidates for green belt. They understand how to define a problem and and they could pretty much do anything that the Master Black Belt can do without the master, I guess. Well-rounded in project management, statistical analysis, financial analysis, statistics, like really good at statistics. They serve as the dedicated resource, and responsibilities of project management, going through that whole thing. Task management, who's doing what, when, throughout the course of this 6, 8, 10-month project. Team management, chooses or recommend team members, define ground rules for the team. And then it comes to us, the green belt. Less intense version, pretty much all the same understanding of tools and statistics without DOE. When it comes to project management, green belt has almost the same responsibilities, and they work on supposedly less complicated and challenging business problems than the black belt. Again, but you see the same tasks, right? Project management, defining scope, marshaling resources, set goals, task management, team management. And then we get to the yellow belt. understands the basic objectives and methods. These are folks that you can pull off the floor, put them on a team with a green belt, help measure, help interpret, elementary understanding about what other Six Sigma belts are doing to help them succeed. In a Six Sigma project, the yellow belt usually serves as a subject matter expert regarding some aspect of the process. And usually supervisors, managers, directors, and sometimes executives are trained at the yellow belt level. It's interesting that at my company at Duraflex, the president that I hired to take over, they now require any new employee to get their yellow belt within the first 90 days during that probationary period. So they've kind of gone in this direction. The responsibilities: define the process scope, help with you get it. I can kind of shake through this, but just a lot of the same. They're helpers, right? And they're part-time. All right, so I think let me just, you guys okay with me just blowing through this and then moving over to the math practice thing real quick? Is that okay? I know it's at 4 right now. You guys okay?
Yep.
All right. It's only a few more. Stakeholders, the recipients, or beneficiaries. You know what? You're gonna get slides, so I'm not gonna read these, and they're not gonna be on the test, Daniel. So let me go through them. SME, subject matter experts. These are like, just think of like an A3 team, and we add somebody from IT on it. They play critical roles to the success of the project. I guess we're going to pick up at team selection next week. We're at slide number. We're all right. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Oh, actually, I can't. Let me skip this one. Let me blow through this real quick. So team selection, guys. I guess I kind of got to, because I think it's 4 o'clock now. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the homework today. Is that okay? Because I have to set the homework up with a slide that's a few ahead of us. So, everybody good?
Whatever works for you, Bill.
Thank you, Anthony.
Fine, Bill.
All right, so project team selection is a cornerstone. These are the things that make a team successful. Yeah, I could go pretty quick through this. Now let's get into the fundamentals a little bit, starting with, I'll be able to give you the homework. Okay, I'm only a few behind here. Voice of the customer first. The voice of the customer is a term used for data-driven plan to discover customer wants and needs, right? So again, data-driven, quantifying what does a customer want. It's an important component to a successful project. There's also other voices that need to be heard: voice of the customer, voice of the business, voice of the associate or fellow employees. Gathering VOC should be performed methodically, and the two most important popular methods are indirect or direct. Indirect data collection for VOC involves passive information exchange, and what I mean by that is it's driving my car through the rear view mirror. It's warranty claims, it's customer complaints that we've experienced, it's service calls that we had to do, it's sales reports that we see that maybe not be happy with, but it's like driving your car through the rear view mirror. That's the indirect data collection to try to define the voice of the customer. They're generally less effective, sometimes dated, require heavy interpretation, or more difficult to confirm. And then there's direct data collection, and they're active and planned customer engagement. So think about this Six Sigma project that lasts 8 or 9 months. During that course of that, we're going to, part of the define phase might be conducting interviews, conducting customer surveys, doing market research, hosting focus groups. They're more effective usually for several reasons. You don't have to interpret what you're getting back for information. The researchers can go deeper when interacting with customers. So it's more about driving your car through the windshield than the rearview mirror. The VOC, gathering it requires consideration of many factors, such as product or service types, customer segments, manufacturing methods, etc. And this information can influence the sampling strategy. Consider which factors are important and build a sample size plan around them. Also consider response rates and adjust the initial sample strategy. So this is all about how do I gather information that's meaningfully enough so I can start to quantify the voice of the customer, what they want. And the next term, the defined phase, is the critical equality. And it consists of the translated data that's gathered by getting the voice of the customer. So I listen to my customer, I hear their voice. How do I turn that into something that is quantifiable, measurable, and meaningful? All right. The VOC is often vague, emotional, or simply a generalization. So the task is to try to get it to it so it's quantifiable, measurable, and meaningful. It can be done through a bunch of different methodologies, as you can see there: group sessions, one-on-one meetings, etc. Consider your confirming audience. Try to avoid factors that may influence their bias responses. The CTQs have to be transformed into specific measurable things. And some of the things that we can use, and we're going to cover two of them today, is tree diagrams, affinity diagrams, Pareto analysis, and a requirement tree helps in facilitating and translating general CTQ categories into something that we can measure and meaningful. The CTQ specifics are 4 components: Y characteristic, a measurable metric, a target value, and a tolerance range. Those are the things we want to establish, all with numbers, right? What's our Y? What's our measurable metric? What's our target value? What will the customer accept and what they won't? What will they tolerate? What's the upper and lower tolerance level? So affinity diagrams, I'll cover these real quick. They're ideal for large amounts. This is brainstorming. This is, and if you think about, like, if you ever use an affinity diagram with an A3 team, I think this will help. Again, large amounts of soft data, anecdotal data resulting from brainstorming. So this is all about, and the A3 team at 3 to 5 people, you need at least 3 to 5 to do an affinity. Have anybody ever done one? A session doing an affinity diagram? Pretty simple. As we get into it, maybe some of you guys have used them. So largely the idea is there's a bunch of steps we'll go through. Here's the steps. 1, clearly define the question or focus of the exercise. And the question is, why are associates late to work? Step 2, and you can do it with sticky notes, on a big board. Record all participant responses on note cards or sticky notes. Everybody's just brainstorming for a little while. Why are associates late to work? And you can see a whole bunch of different responses that might be there. Traffic, dog threw up, whatever. Then you take those. Step 3, lay out all note cards or post-it sticky notes onto a wall and look for common themes. Put them in order by, pick some kind of general categories and put the sticky notes until all the responses are allocated, and then reevaluate and make adjustments. And then we'll jump to, so that's the affinity diagram, very simple. It's on a wall, it's a brainstorming session. And then the Pareto principle, it helps us to help prioritize or focus on the vital few items, versus the trivial many that have the greatest impact. Also known as 80-20. It means 80% of our effects come from a few of the causes. And, I've done everything from, our customer, 20% of your customers represent 80% of your sales. And 20% of what you sell, 20% of your product line represents 80% of your sales. It's amazing how close it comes right out to close to 80-20 almost every time. We're talking about things that have been measured for a while. We're talking about, not new products. We're not talking about, innovation. We're talking about things that have been in our product line for a while. It's just amazing how often it comes. Old Willifred Fritz hit it on the head. So for example, is 80% of your phone calls are made by 20% of your employees. If you look at your, on your iPhone, you know, if you look at your call log, you'll see that probably 20% of the same people represent 80% of your phone calls. 20% of airports handle 80% of flights. 80% of food ordered in a restaurant comes from 20% of the menu. 80% information is in the first 20% of a report. 20% of employees cause 80% of the headaches, and 20% of the features of software use 80% of the time. And it's useful because I don't want to be going after the trivial few. I want to try to identify those X's that are critical to quality. So it's a kind of it's an easy, quick tool to kind of identify those. It's a modified histogram bar chart where the data has been sorted, and we're going to get into that in a second. By percentage to total and cumulative percentage, kind of looks like the chart on the right, you know, versus a bar chart where I could see all my, you know, all my data broken up. The Pareto charts on it. This is what the homework's going to be, is to build one of these based on a little bit of data that I'm going to give you in a second. So I think we're going to stop there. We'll pick up with cost of poor quality in terms of this. Thank you so much for bearing with me, the extra 10 minutes. Let me take you over to, you're still there? Woohoo! Let me take you over to the homework. And it is right here. All right, here's the homework. Everybody see it okay? Now, again, please don't laugh at me if you've done this 100 times before. I think part of it is I just want to get into the practice of each session, giving you the math. Like I'm going to be emailing you this math practice every week pretty much, and you email it back to me, getting into the flow of it all. So here's my problem, right? The problem is I'm broke. I don't have a pot to piss in. I don't have any money, right? So I want to identify the critical few factors of why I'm broke. So here's a list of my monthly expenses, and there's a dollar amount spent, and my monthly income, my monthly expenses are about $4,700, $4,765 to be exact, and my monthly income is $4,760. So my plan was to put aside something for savings. So that would be, it looks like it's going to be about $5 per month, and I can't even do that. So the assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to draw a Pareto chart with the cumulative totals and make a recommendation. All right. And again, what I'm going to task you to do, you may know how to do this already, is you can pull up, Google it. Google how do we use Excel for Pareto. And then when you do that, what I look for is a Pareto chart to right here with a recommendation. Like what are my critical few factors, and what should I do to get myself out of this bind where I can't even save $5 a month? If you choose to accept it, that's the assignment. Have you guys done Pareto charts typically? Stephen, yes. Daniel, yes. I'm sure Brendan has 1,000 times. So this is about 10 minutes of homework. All right. All right, cool. Everybody good? So far, we're done for today.
Phil, are you going to forward that to us so we got all the data?
Yeah, I'm going to forward you the math practice, and I'm going to forward you the recording, and I'm going to forward you the slides.
Okay.
We got through today, and we're going to pick it up at CTQ next week.
Okay.
All right. Everybody good?
Very nice.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bill.
Have a great night.